Hey, my friends, I hope you're doing well. I got some more WoW Classic behind the scenes exploration stuff today, and a couple questions for you guys that are either general Classic or SOD experts. So I love exploring the WoW Classic maps, whether it's the two main continent maps, Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, or the smaller maps that are used for dungeons and can sometimes be copies of sections of the main map, like Shadowfang Keep here is a copy of early Silverpine, and other maps are completely custom, like Dead Mines is a map that houses Van Cleef's Juggernaut at the end. And some are custom maps, like Nax is a copy of sections of EPL with chunks of Winterspring laid over it to mirror Northrend for SAF and KT portion of the model. And some are completely unused and weird, but remain in the game files, like Emerald Dream and Developer Island. So anyway, I noticed recently that some brand new maps had been added to the Classic Era client starting around a year ago. And for the longest time, this client remained unchanged and included the same maps as vanilla. So we'll go through these new maps here. But first off, this is WoW.Export. And as always, myself and anyone that likes to explore WoW owes a massive debt of gratitude to Marlamin and Kroo-in-yuh, who created the original WoW.Tools and then the WoW.Export tool that I'll use here. These guys have done an amazing amount of work to make it possible for a layman like me to explore these behind the scenes areas. So thank you very much, guys. WoW.Export is a standalone Windows app that lets you explore assets from either the WoW build on your PC or Blizzard CDN, the content delivery system. And when you bring up your Classic Era build, for example, you have the option to view regular models like buildings and caves. You can view character models, and then all the other assets, including the maps that we're going to talk about here. So this is the list of maps, and you can tell by the numbers that these 43 maps were the originals, starting with Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, maps 0 and 1, going all the way down to obviously the very last map added in vanilla, Naxxramas, map 533, which was also called Stratholme Raid in the game files because of how it was originally going to be entered through Strat. And so those were always the maps until around a year ago, when suddenly new maps started popping into the client and showing up in this list when I'd open WoW.Export. And they appeared slowly over time, but as of now, there are 15 new maps. And the first one is an interesting mystery. This is the Searing Basin, which is a copy of 12 chunks of Southern Badlands and a bit of Burning Steppes, but mostly it's this unused, unfinished area east of Burning Steppes, but it's been modified to have this square in it. And I found an interesting article on Reddit by people in hardcore that had found a goblin outside of Orgrimmar that would teleport you to this instance, and you'd end up right in the middle of this square. And people were guessing that maybe it was an area where you could do Makara but not be bothered by other people because you'd be in an instance, that maybe it was going to be used for like the Starforge or the OTK Makara tournament, but that's not actually what they did. They ended up using areas of the inaccessible AQ areas for that tournament. So people didn't really know what this is for, and still sort of don't. It was surmised that maybe it was a raid test area for SOD, but we don't know. So if you had any idea what this was, I'd love to hear about it. But a very odd, sort of newly created, and you could tell that it was new because you could see they even sort of like spray painted over sections of the other zones when they put this new square in. So that's the first new map. Next is Demonfall Canyon. This obviously is a copy of areas of Ashenvale and the Fellfire Hill area, which was always in original Classic, but was made a new instance in, I believe, Phase 4 in SOD. And I think that you needed a trinket to be able to create a portal, and then you could enter into here and do a new dungeon. So they added a new map for that. Third is the Tainted Scar, and the next couple of these will be also for SOD, where they have added, as you might know, the world bosses were changed to no longer be out in the world, but truly be instances. So the first was for Kazakh. This is the southwest area of the Blasted Lands where Kazakh had always patrolled. It's now an instance. So this is just a copy of sections of ZG over here, Blasted Lands, and the area where the instance would be. Next is the Storm Cliffs, a copy obviously of Azshara, so that you could fight Azuragos in an instance in SOD. Next up is the Crystal Vale, yet another area that was done in the main world in original Classic, but they made an instance for SOD. And I don't know if this is the same in Classic Era now, where this is an instance like in Hardcore or Anniversary or not. But obviously this northwest area of Silithus is where you would fight Thunderin for, did someone say the Blessed Blade of the Windseeker? And I believe in SOD, you can actually enter this raid now and fight him for other loot. So they made that a clear instance. Again, copy of Silithus, but with some strange changes added in. There's water down here and other things that aren't in the main Silithus map. The next several of these are for some of the class-specific quest lines that showed up in SOD. So first off is the Shadow Hold. Shadow Hold is so that you could have a copy of Jadenar for an instance version of the Hold that was used for the Rogue Dagger quest, where rogues would have to stealth all the way through without being seen. And again, thank you to Simonize for showing this. The Burning of Anderhall is a cool one. It's obviously a big copy of sections of Western Plaguelands and then some of the surrounding zones, but you can tell that Anderhall is sort of redone. The buildings are newer, and this was, of course, added for the Paladin quest line, added to SOD for the Paladins to get their weapon, the Truthbearer. Next is Starfall Barrow Den. This is obviously a section of Winterspring up here, and this was added for the Druid weapon quest line. And again, I think you had to be alone, and then a portal would appear in this area, and you could go in and complete your quest to get that weapon. Next is the Nightmare Grove, and it's yet another situation where we have an instance version of what used to be the world bosses, but this one's a little bit different. You can see that when you first bring up the map, you pop in and see a copy of a section of Faralos. This would be like the northeast section of Faralos, and you have a little bit of Desolas here, where you'd fight the skeletons down here, and actually this is where Dire Maul would be over here in this big blank area, and this is unused, but this is where you would be fighting Lethon. But this is all a single instance and technically a single map, and I only noticed after zooming out on here quite a bit that there's other squares in here too. You can see how they all sort of line up. So this would be a copy of Duskwood, where you would fight Emerus. This again is the Faralos area. This up here is a section of the Hinterlands where you would fight Ysandre. And then up here is a copy of Ashenvale for Terrar. So 4 different mini maps, and anytime you fight those dragons, you're always in the same instance or on the same map here, Nightmare Grove. Next up is another big question I had for you guys. So there's 2 related maps. This is the Deadwind Pass, and obviously it's copies of the Deadwind Pass that includes sections of Elwyn and Duskwood and even some ZG down here. But this was obviously created for the new Karazhan Crypts raid. But the thing that's strange is there's a completely identical map down here that they added. So they added 2 maps that, as far as I can tell, are 100% identical. And one or the other of these would include the model for the new 5-man dungeon Karazhan Crypts that was added in Phase 7 of SOD. And by the way, that's a very cool, interesting model. If I digress a bit and hit models and find Crypt, MD Crypt D, that gets me to this huge model that is the Karazhan Crypts. And this model would be laid in to that map that we were just looking at. And really an interesting place. If you go, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, this big room down here is very famous from even early explorers for this chain. I think it was filled with water and had all these hanging bodies in it, and a very cool place. And so this all finally was used in SOD, the stuff that John Stotts had worked on decades ago in this huge model. So that's laid into either Deadwind Pass or Karazhan Crypts, and I don't know why there are 2. Maybe someone out there does. Next up would be 2 more related maps that I'll need some help from some of you on. First off is a huge map, the Scarlet Enclave, which obviously is a big section. This whole thing is, I think, 42 chunks. That's a copy of EPL, but a very much modified EPL. You can see here, I'll show on the left the original. It only had Tyr's Hand. And on the right, we have a highly modified version where they've added in for this one, even though it's called Scarlet Enclave, I believe this is the map that's used for the new Avalon sort of quest hub and questing in SOD that was added in, I guess it's Phase 8 now. But I may have these reversed, because we also have Eastern Plaguelands Scarlet Raid Phase, which is a smaller section. It doesn't include all of EPL, but it's largely the same with a few modifications of this new Avalon area. It doesn't have all the ships out here on the right and other things, but it's largely the same. So I'm guessing that this is probably for the raid, and that Scarlet Enclave, the larger version, is for the the new quest hub. But as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there's nowhere where you zone in when you go to New Avalon Quest Hub. I don't think you're zoning into an instance. I think that that's just all part of EPL, but technically you'd be in anytime that you're in regular EPL, you'd be in map 0 Eastern Kingdoms. So I don't know if they're using layers to phase you in to this area or how that's all working. It's a bit of a mystery to me, but at any rate, this is some of the most interesting because it's highly modified new content that they've added to the classic era client for SOD. Scarlet Enclave and Eastern Plaguelands Scarlet Raid phase. Talked about Karzan Crypts, last two. So the Scarab Deus, this is obviously a section of AQ, the southwest area of Silithus. And my initial thought here was that this is another question for you experts. I assume this was added as part of the opening of the AQ gates for SOD or maybe for anniversary realms. But I know for a fact that this was not a separate instance back in vanilla in the 2000s when we did this. So I was confused as to why this was here. So it's mostly the same as the Kalimdor version of AQ, but cleaned up a bit and then missing some of the model sections over here. And last but not least, we have Naxxramas, another small mystery to me. So Naxxramas was already in the game because it was originally part of vanilla. It's not something new that we've added for SOD or anything like that. This is the original Naxxramas map that's been in the game forever. And I mentioned before, it's mostly a copy of EPL with Naxxramas laid over the top of it, so that if there's ever situations where you're looking out windows or things, you would see this. And then they laid sections of Winterspring over the top right section, and they actually even rotated some of these to create a bigger section, which was used for nothing more than so that when you looked out the windows after you'd killed KT and they open up, you'd see the snow and think you're in Northrend. The only difference I can see between the original map 533 that was in vanilla, and if you look at this top coast up here, you can see there's some land, and then the new map that was added most recently for Nax is that the coast is just a little bit different. There's just this sort of gray box, and then they made the coast actual water here. So yet another mystery with these new maps that maybe someone out there can help me solve. So anyway, that is the 15 new maps that have been added recently to our classic era client. Thank you to Simon Eyes and Kago, who obviously I took some SOD footage from. Their channels are linked in the description. And if you enjoy WoW Classic behind the scenes and want to hit me with a like or sub, I appreciate it very much. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great day.